Video we're going to be discussing in terms of statistics how like sampling methods, how you would sample a population if you were doing a study on something. A large part of that is going to be how do you of course you can't do it for the whole population a lot of the time, so how do you collect a sample that's going to appropriately represent what the population might actually be like. And so, you know, you don't want to include biases. You don't want to just pick your friends or something like that if you're doing a study, in terms of how fast you run the mile, and you know, do the whole cross-country team because you're on the cross-country team. That's not a very good sample because it doesn't really represent the entire population of, say, your high school or your college or whatever. So what we're going to do is discuss these sampling methods. And as far as sampling methods, there are quite a few, but we're going to start with the first one here. We say a random sampling. Okay, so when we talk about a random sample, basically what we're talking about is essentially this. We talk about a lottery. So I'm going to kind of illustrate this here, but this box right here, let's do this. Let's call this, say, the entire population of, say, let's go back to that example. We say your high school. Maybe you want to measure the average mile time, or this, like the mile time. See how, teenagers do these days. We say, okay, if you wanted to look at what the mile times of the population are, since the population is so big, what we'll do instead is do a random sampling, and basically it means that everybody in this area here gets a number, okay? And what we're going to do is we're basically going to draw that number out of a hat. So I don't have much else to say about random sampling other than, it's a pretty good way to do things. I'd say a lot of the time, a random sample, okay? A little bit different is a systematic sample. Okay, when we talk about a systematic sample, it's only different from a random sampling in that it's still kind of a lottery, but what we're going to do is this. If this is our entire population here, we are going to choose like every kth subject. Okay, so essentially we would randomly say, start at, the third person. Everybody gets a number just like in the random sampling. Maybe we pick out this third person here because that's who we drew out of a hat. And then we're going to, get every kth subject. So in this case, if k equals 5, basically we would say that the next person we're going to choose is the 8th person because we would start at 3 and go up by 5. We say now choose the 8th person, and if we were to go up by another 5, we say choose the 13th person, and then go up by another 5, we choose the 18th person in our population, and this scheme would continue throughout the whole thing. So essentially, systematic sampling is just kind of like random sampling in that everybody gets a number in the population. It's just that we'll pick a place to start and then go up by however many we need in order to get an appropriate size sample that we want there. Okay, stratified sampling. So now stratified sampling. A stratified sample. When you hear strata, it means layers, okay, something that has layers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give an example here, but stratified sampling, let's say we'll go back to the high school example here. What if we had, like freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors? And what we want to do is we want to look at mile times through the whole high school, but since these are already split into layers, what if we choose, 20 people from each class? This would be considered to be a stratified sample because when we pick 20 people out of each of these, what we're really doing is we're picking it out of layered batches already, okay? So a stratified sample is any instance in which we're already picking a few out of each possible layer that already exists in the population, okay? And then let's talk about a cluster sample. When you hear cluster sample, I want you to think like a bundle, okay? So for instance, let's say I teach, 7 classes throughout the day, and we'll write them out here. These are all of my different classes. We'll go with 6 classes throughout the day, just out of convenience. So this is all of the population right here, kind of. And we say that I've got my first block, second block, third block, fourth block, fifth block, and sixth block. The idea here is this: if I wanted to study how effective, say, like a study session technique is for my students, what I could do is I could say, well, what I'll do is I'll do classes 1 through 4 like I always do them, and then 5 and 6 I'll do separately. The reason why we call it, maybe choosing just to study group 5 and group 6 and do them differently, a cluster sampling, is because these weren't necessarily random sampling. I didn't, give everybody a number and pick their names out of a hat. These classes 5 and 6 were already clustered together. I did not have any say in forming them. So what I'm doing is I'm choosing, I suppose I could say, choosing some already organized clusters, organized groups out of a set of groups. Okay, so those are the 4 different sampling methods. The last one here that I'm going to throw in just as a matter of just throwing this out there, but we say a convenience sample. When I want to collect data on, say, mile times or something like that, maybe it just so happens that I need the data right now. And this isn't always necessarily the best way to take a sample of things, but it's to choose, we'll say people or things to sample just because they're there. Just because they are easily available, essentially. So if I wanted to do, say, average mile time, I suppose I could just choose the first 10 people to walk in the door out of convenience, because I don't have time to assign everybody a number and pick them out of a hat, or assign everybody a number, choose a place to start, and then go up by 5 every time. Or I don't have layers to choose, say so many people out of to begin with, or I don't have clusters of people already grouped together to choose certain clusters already formed. So a convenience sample is just merely grabbing some people or objects to examine and organize their data and draw conclusions from just because they were there for you. Cheers.